Lincoln awaited patiently in the room, keeping his ears trained for the door, glancing around the room. Actually, to tell you the truth, his patience was beginning to run out, and along with it, his urgency to get to whatever he could from Lynn. Is she still in the bathroom? Or if she's not, the boy thought to himself. Lincoln's eyes widened a bit as the one possibility came to mind. Did she leave the whole building? Hearing two parts of footsteps as the loud got his answer, Dr. Lopez walked in with somewhat of a better-looking Lynn. Her eyes were still pink and puffiness that hadn't died down yet, knowing that she'd have to talk them out. Miranda sat back in her chair, folding one leg over the other. Upon sitting down, Lynn looked directly at her brother's eyes. All those things you said about your dream, are they really true? Lincoln nodded, including the part about me saving you? Lincoln nodded again, averting her gaze for a few seconds. I still don't know if we made it. He stared back at her, clasping his hands over her over his lap. But there is a couple of things I really need to ask. What is it? Lynn spoke, leaning forward a bit. Lincoln breathed. Here it goes. He mentally prepared himself. How did the sister fight protocol came up, and why was I not told about it after it started? For Lynn, this would be a relatively easy answer. After all, she was one of the sisters who designed its additional stages. However, the Jacques grew a little nervous about this. It may be a difficult pill for her brother to swallow, practically whenever she got the part of planning why they hadn't told him anything. The brunette took a moment to gather her memories so she could be as accurate as possible. It came up sometime after all of us had a series of arguments with each other a few months back. You probably remember a couple of them, especially that time Lana used some of your comics as cage cleaning without lining without asking you. Lincoln frowned a little. I do, and I recently paid for those. I know you girls have been fighting a bit more than usual, but I tuned it out since I felt like it was none of my business. You're right, it wasn't. So during the time when you were camping with Clyde at the B&B all weekend, we had a sibling meeting about your issues. All of us are just tired of fighting, and we just wanted to figure out something before we end up trashing the whole house again. Now, we thought about waiting for you to get back before discussing it, but there was one thing all of us had to agree on. Lynn paused when Lincoln wanted to voice his opinion, a downcast look on his face. That I'm the reason you guys keep fighting over stuff? Well, what? The Jacques spoke in surprise, looking at her brother as if she grew a fur thumb. No, that wasn't at all. We agreed that you didn't get into consistent arguments with any of us, so you had a pass. While you were thinking of the strategies to solve our problems, I mentioned the time you helped Lucy and I make up. They asked us on how it happened, and we just told them that I slept in your room until me and Lucy were ready to talk. Lincoln bit his cheek. I believe I remember that, and I had to secretly get you guys to make up, since you wouldn't do it on your own. Yeah, that was also floated around, Lynn admitted. So seeing that how it worked out, we thought the best way to avoid fighting was just to avoid each other until we were ready to work it out. From there on, we had put together a system where if two people were in a heated argument and needed to cool down, we'll make sure the arguing sisters don't see or hear each other for at least a day, depending on how serious it was. Lisa even developed a chart to show how bad the situations get and what kind of measures we'd have to take. Lincoln raised a brow, such as... Lynn crossed her legs. The lowest fret was a field of daisies, which meant everything was okay. Thunderstorm was a second, meaning at least two sisters are having a fight. But they might not require being separated, the twins mainly. The third one was called Hissing Cat and... Wait, how is the cat more dangerous than a thunderstorm? The boy asked. I asked the same thing, 'cause unless a cat shoots lightning, I doubt Cliff is that much of a threat. But Lenny suggested the name, and Lisa said thunderstorm mostly requires attention if it's around, while an angry cat is something you want to distance yourself from. Lori pointed out of how that didn't make much sense, especially since our area can get pretty nasty weather, like that tornado back in mid-April. Anyway, we just had to leave it be before we ended up arguing about it all day. Okay, Lincoln replied, giving it an uncertain look. Anyway, by the time the hissing cat is in place, that's when we still keep the angry girls separated. By the 4th level, which is the Stampede T-Rex. Yeah, Lana made up the name. It basically means whoever is arguing haven't calmed down yet, and they need more time to chill. Lynn grimaced, knowing how she was about to say, it would be rather difficult to say since it was one of the reasons that caused her brother to get more involved. We'd use your room as a holdout spot if both sisters were upstairs. The white-haired child gave a neutral look. What was the reason for that? Well, it worked out when me and Lucy were fighting one time, but I brought it up. You didn't like me sleeping in your room that much. Just to save you the trouble, it'd only be temporarily, even though it happened 3 times. Lynn muttered the last part in embarrassment. Lincoln's nostrils flared a little as he pursed lips. Okay, but why did you guys have to use my bed sheets as a divider for Lori and Lenny's room? Lynn gave a sigh pause as she held her mouth open, as if she was about to speak. However, she closed when nothing vivid came out. It was agreed that using Lincoln's bedding was stupid, even of itself given that there were extra sheets in the basement, as Mom pointed out a while ago. So the only logical conclusion was, we didn't really think that through, and Mom got mad at us for doing that when she found out cause we had spares in the basement. A wave of heat flashed through Lincoln for a few seconds before it disappeared. He jolted a few seconds after it wore off, feeling a bit unsettled. And the last level, of course, was erupting volcano. I don't think I need to tell you what it means. You were there when it happened, I think. Lincoln let his shoulders sag a little. Yeah, everyone started fighting no matter who was doing what. Yeah, Lynn rubbed the back of her head. After that, we went to Mom and Dad to get their opinion, and they said it was cool. They were happy with taking charge and fixing our mess. But I kind of think they just didn't want to always settle our fights. They would have helped us during one time when we actually used that stupid protocol. Lincoln's eyes widened a bit. That was the only time it was used? Lincoln gave a low nod. So does that mean everyone just forgot about me and that's it? Unfortunately, Lynn shook her head. We didn't forget. Since you hardly get into fights with us, the girl gave a frustrated groan. We didn't want you to get caught up in our bullshit, okay? Sorry about the swearing, but it's the only way I could say it. Sometimes we argue over the stupidest things, like Lori and Lenny with that dress, and we thought you wouldn't really understand and find it stupid. And you were right, Lincoln. It was pretty much stupid. But both Lori and Lenny wouldn't shut up about who bought the dress first, so we enacted the protocol so they stopped screaming at each other. Lincoln bit his cheek again, getting into warning parties, wanting to stop complaining about the whole thing. And he himself knew that fighting over wearing the same dress was dumb. Now he was reflected on it. He heard Lori wanted Lenny to take her dress back, even though she was already wearing one. His hands softly curled into fists, while his eyebrows tilted down. This was starting to sound like the whole fight had been started because of a stupid pride thing between his sisters, his older ones. Wouldn't be the first time, especially with Lori. Okay, the boy nodded. So what was the real reason you guys wouldn't let me watch TV that time? Unbeknownst to him, there was a hint of irritation in his voice. Lynn picked up on it, a look of concern showing on her face. Still, she needed that answer for that. We were taking extra precautions, plus Luna tried doing her jam session while Lori was trying to cool down, and almost took a mirror to the face. So when the hissing cat is active, we made sure the angry person has a place to themselves. Lynn slumped in her seat a bit, even though our choice of rooms was poor. Lincoln's gaze softened a bit. Okay, so they didn't want me to draw any more anger from Lori. His breath hitched a few seconds. Even though I ended up making all of them mad, the boy breathed through his mouth before letting a sigh escape him. Okay, if it isn't too much trouble, I have 2 more questions. Feel free to ask, Lynn replied, unfolding her arms and letting them fall to her lap. But why did you guys do it? Lincoln's asked. Lynn raised a brow, which the boy didn't knew he had to be specific. Why did you guys hurt me like that? I didn't. He took a moment to try and take a calming breath, wet sensation building in his eyes. I didn't mean to insult you guys like that. But I was just getting tired of everything I went through that weekend. And on top of that, why I didn't have anyone to stop the protocol if that wasn't working. Was wondering when he would say that. Lynn sighed in awkwardly, staring at the carpet like if she was convicted of murder. Lincoln, you probably know as well as I do that me and our other sisters are more aggressive when we like to argue and to imagine. The athlete's voice was solemn and neutral. All of us weren't thinking straight that way, and we just kept arguing about who was right and this and that, and being too stubborn to back off and shut up when we really needed to. Then all because you kept spilling secrets, we suddenly got the idea that it was your fault. You're not wrong, though. Lincoln gripped his arms and he blinked back his tears. If it wasn't for me, it wouldn't have happened. Len gave a light huff. Maybe, but you weren't wrong. You were practically dumber than Lenny for thinking our system would work with more than 4 of our sisters having problems, and we had a few people to manage it. It's like trying to set up a defense on the line, but then you put up backliners in the wrong place. All that anger would have been thrown at each other, ended up being given to you. We practically broke you. She then shook a little as she deepened a breath in deep. You actually could have escaped it when you made it past us. The teen then glanced down at her hands, her knitted brows together. I ruined it and caught you. Neither child didn't say anything for a few moments. For Lincoln, he was too busy absorbing all the information he was given to voice his opinion, and Lynn decided to see if he ever wanted to talk more before she could continue. Miranda looked between them, wondering if either child had any more to say. Certainly seemed like given their body language. However, her attention was focused on elsewhere, the phone on her desk rang. Excuse me for a moment. The Louds gave a watch as the therapist lifted the receiver out of the cradle. Dr. Lopez, how may I help you? Yes, okay, great. The woman looked up at the clock hung on the wall. Give me a couple minutes. I'm still with 2 more clients. Miranda set the phone back down before making her way over. Kids, unfortunately, we'll have to wrap this up as I have another person here booked for their appointment. She sat back in her chair. Is there anything else you two want to say to each other before we finish? Lynn gave a short nod before locking eyes with her brother. I know you may not believe in me, and I know I can't speak behalf of our sisters, but I'm really sorry for everything I've done to you. She paused to collect her thoughts. I believe we could both agree that I've been messing up our relationship long before this mess, and I didn't even notice until I was I'd done so much to you. She paused. I didn't notice until I realized how much I was mean to you as a brother. You probably think of me as somewhat of a blowhard, those ego-sized Texas, and only care about winning. But you also may think I pick on you a lot just because you're an easy target. But none of those are true. I never missed it. You just missed the times we used to play together when we were very young. Like around the time Lucy was born, you know? You probably don't remember much about them, but I never forget. Lincoln didn't say anything, but the intensive gaze was giving Lynn clued into her that, considering her words at the very least. I'm sorry I broke your arm. She flashed a little gentle smile at him. And it's nice that you don't have to wear that cast anymore. Lynn frowned a bit as her brother shifted his right arm over his left, wrapping his fingers around the elbow. Okay, you're still a bit touchy about that. But just keep in mind that none of your sisters were trying to hurt you. We still haven't ever since you ended up in the hospital. And you can imagine what kind of punishment Mom and Dad slapped us on day 1. The Jacques flinched a little as she nearly forgot one last detail. And if you're going to do something like that again, can you please ask for Luann next? She's got a lot on her plate that she wants to get off her chest, and I'm pretty sure you can imagine what it is. The mention of Luann almost immediately made Lincoln flashback to what happened on April Fool's Day and the subsequent days as he patiently waited for the real eyebrows and hair to grow back. She probably wants to apologize for all the pranks she pulled that day, Lincoln quinted, as a little eye more heated thought came to him. Though she didn't say sorry during the time I pretended she wasn't around. The loud boy shifted his mouth slightly on the reflection of the other answers Lynn had given him. He hadn't detected any subtle hints of malice or dishonesty, and with someone like Lynn was being more quite easy to spot. Lincoln knew very well that Lynn could easily get him to agree on something. With the threat of using him as a practice dummy, something outright admitted was wrong about herself. On top of that, he had much more better understanding as to why the sister fight protocol had eluded him for so long, and it was why he also tried to fix things only resulted in making them worse. Even so, the fact that they neglected to tell him about the protocol in the first place also meant the blame fell into the sisters. The boy breathed in deep before uttering a short reply to his sister. "Okay, but I want to take some time to think about it." Lynn became a bit uneasy, and even with the tone her brother added a response, at least a short of agreed to her request. A few minutes later, a shocking turn of events. Both kids would find themselves riding back in their respective bodies in Vanzilla. Lincoln thought about waiting for the Mr. McBride for a ride, but he figured a ride to the very back of the family wagon, if Lynn sat in the passenger seat front, calm, cautious, which he still was. He also wanted some time alone to think. Their mother asked how their session went, but neither child gave too many details. For Lynn, she felt as if weight had been lifted off her chest, and felt somewhat ease, knowing that Lincoln was willing to hear her out so she can get more of the message through him. But she still felt that it would probably take years before Lincoln could even consider trusting her and her sisters. The athlete also noted of how the brother seemed to look as if he was growing annoyed throughout the session, and sometimes looked as if he was having an argument with himself on how he should be feeling about what they discussed it. In fact, the tomboy thought to himself as the trophy for the Miss Institute's sister, that was exactly what Lincoln was going through right now. He continued to reflect on what Lynn had told him about the sister fight protocol, and the answers to how and why it happened. More importantly, he was given the straight answer as to why the girls were so vicious to him that day, yet despite the truth being revealed to him, as subjective as it was in his opinion, they weren't exactly the answers he was hoping to hear. The girls intend to sound good on paper, but it appears as if they considered anything before putting the protocol into use. Lincoln could at least attest that was the problem, as they were both feeling of that kind of scheme. On a scale like this, Lincoln repeatedly found himself referring back to the protocol as a whole and how the girls were so adamant of trying to make it like a failing system work. Now Lincoln was well aware of his own faults after glossing over them repeatedly in the weeks before. He would admit that he should have kept his mouth shut and let the girls do their own thing first round, especially when he caused a second bare-knuckle brawl. He could even understand some people needing space, like Lynn said. It was stupid for them to block off the kitchen and only bathroom just because one person was having a fit in a house full of 13 people. But the biggest problem Lincoln could point out was SFP, was the fact that his sisters outright refused to explain to him in events. Weeks back, Lincoln admitted that he thought his passion to help his sisters is something he thought was being lost due to the protocol being in place. Today, though, he could tell what he's looking into drawing more of the phrase that has been given for the help of the little art has done this far. But that wasn't due to become the point of connection, the lack of information, and it would have been useful if what bothered him. It wasn't like the other girls forgot to tell him either, because they quote-unquote didn't want him to get caught in their BS. Okay, fine, Lincoln would have appreciated that, but not telling him about it, he was inconveniently a grand total of 4 times. If you count him being forced to leave out of the house due to the brawl, and was an easy solution to the problem. Not to mention that he was practically inclined to get involved whenever they took his room from him twice and stole his bedding. Speaking of his room, Lincoln was beginning to have a difficult time seeing why the alternatives weren't suggested. He mentally kicked himself for not asking earlier. There was a total of 6 bedrooms in the house, 5 upstairs and the parents' room on the ground floor. If the girls were so pressed to hide someone in a room, why exactly did they have to be his room, comparatively the small space. They couldn't have just feuding the person any times ever than the more spacious bedrooms for a few minutes. Plus, when you think about it, there's at least 3 bedrooms you could pass before reaching his own if he were coming down the stairs. And yet the girls bypassed all of them just for his? Adding on to that, Lincoln still didn't even know what was so hard to understand about Lori and Lenny having an ego contest and wearing the same dress. They could share the same room, but not the same clothing? He still knew his sisters could be childish and really, and how exactly were his parents okay with all this? Did they even know their daughters were having a fit over? And the last one thing to take note? Lincoln blinked a few times as he felt a dull ache, coming from just below his forehead and lower jaw. He had been completely unaware that there was a scowl on his face in the entire room, along with his knuckles turning white due to grasping his jeans so hard and silently grinding his teeth together. So many more questions that needed to be asked, and yet the boy found himself becoming more and more bitter due to the longer he kept picking the part of the protocol with a regular common sense. It was at this point, for the first time, what seemed like forever, the loud boy realized that he had been expressing emotion he wouldn't feel towards his sisters again, and what got his butt kicked in the first place? Anger.